A very good morning to all of you. We have been talking uh, about different literary terms and concepts in yesterday's lecture, and earlier as well. We dealt with some of the terms beginning with mm, E. In today's lecture, I shall go ahead with the next later. F, the terms beginning with F, in which we'll study form, frame story, and framework. Of course, there are many other terms which I have not covered. Therefore, I every now and then suggest to people to go through a glossary of literary terms. A glossary of literary terms is a kind of dictionary which helps you refer it back as and when required. Well, let's talk about the word form, the term form. The Actually we talk about form, exam form, etc. In that context. So when you talk about form, you say I have to fill the exam form, admission form, etc. So what is that exactly? So a form in general refers to any kind of outline. So the outline in which you fill in your information. In the context of literature, while talking about the form, we can understand that it is an organizing principle. An organizing principle is the manner in which different elements are put together in relation to its total effect, to achieve total effect. It is an organizing principle, in short. Okay, and the manner in which the elements, now we talk about the elements of language, the elements of sentence, etc. In the same manner we talk about the elements of poetry, elements of drama. So these elements include rhythm, rhyme, figures of speech, poetic devices, etc. And when we talk about the elements of plot, we talk about exposition, we talk about climax, etc. Okay, in the same manner, form is an organizing principle of these elements. Form refers to the way, to the manner in which these elements are put together to achieve a total effect. And this term is sometimes used interchangeably with the term structure. We talk about the structure of a building. So we means understand form as a structure, means it can be used interchangeably, and it is understood in contrast to content, meaning, form and meaning. In language you will be studying all these things, in your paper 3, form and content. This is the dichotomy, proposed by Saussure, Noam Chomsky, etc. So form can be understood in contrast with content. Content is a meaning, a message given by that particular piece of work, whereas form is an outline in which that content is put. So it is the if the form is the building, we can understand form as the building. Content is what is in the building and what the building is specifically designed to express. Okay, so the outside structure of the building is the form, whereas content is what is in the building, the inside part, what the building is specifically designed to express, how that building expresses some meaning. For example, we say it is a tomb, or it is a palace, it is a hut, okay, it is a bungalow, okay. Means this gives you an idea, means the outside structure is the form, and whatever content is there inside. So that is the message of the literary piece of work. And we understand form in contrast to the content. So, form, the term form denotes the conventions, the rules, we can say, traditional rules, which govern the layout and manner of treatment of a literary work. Means you call some building as a palace, some other buildings as a mansion. Now, what makes you to call it? So there is a convention that govern this particular layout, and understanding the layout or manner becomes crucial, and form can be understood as the conventions which govern the layout and manner of treatment of a literary work, how a literary work is written, how a poem is written, how a novel is written. So although it is used interchangeably with structure, it is opposed to structure. Means structure is the working out of those conventions in a particular text. Means structure is the working out how those conventions are used in that particular text, whereas form refers to the overall conventions. Okay, we can say we can understand it as the difference between competency and performance. Form can be referred to in Chomsky's term. Chomsky was the famous American linguist. And when we understand this dichotomy in the context of Chomsky, we can say that the form is a kind of the overall knowledge of something, whereas structure is a specific knowledge. Okay, how those rules, how those conventions are implemented in that particular piece of work or literary text. So the form is what a text has in common with other texts. You need to understand what uh, the text has in common with other text. Okay. Then structure is particular to the text itself. If you have studied language to some extent, you will be able to understand this terminology in a very effective manner. Structure is what is unique to a particular text. Form is what is in common, whereas structure is what is unique to a particular text. So when we talk about the contemporary usage of the term form, the two forms, as I mentioned earlier, are used often more or less interchangeably, we can say. They are used as more or less interchangeable, means they don't differentiate between the form and structure, but there is a difference in it. The form is a general term, means what a text has in common with other texts, whereas a structure is a particular term, means it refers to the unique quality of that text. So for form, as we understand in this context, some critics substitute the term genre or genre is the French word. We have already somewhere discussed about it. Again, we are going to understand it. Genre means type or kind. So some critics substitute structure, a genre by the term form. Okay. Of course, this term has some kind of disagreeable overtones because genre tends to imply over adherence to formal conventions, whereas form is uh, very general term. Okay, so many English speakers find genre difficult to pronounce in a way that is not disagreeable in the ear. Means French people may not accept the pronunciation because genre is the French word, and the term may not, the way the British people, the English speakers pronounce it is not acceptable. Okay, so with these words, I just uh, stop my discussion on the term form. Now we shall go ahead with the term frame story. Look, you have to understand it in relation to form itself. So, frame story is a story told within a frame, a framework, or a story constituting a frame for another story. A frame story is a story told within a frame. We talk about a photo frame, etc. Okay, frame makers, for example. So, it is a story told within a frame or a story which constitutes a frame for another story, means each provides a frame for another story. For example, for a kind of collage, we can say collage, collage, collage is the combination of different pictures. So it is a story within a frame or a story constituting a frame for another story or a series of other stories. Means in a frame story you can have a particular structure of a story, but it may provide a frame for another story or different series of stories. So, a frame story is a story that provides a framework for another story or stories told within it. We say story within story. And frame story usually is found in novels, plays or dramas, poems, even television, films, musicals, and operas. A frame story is a unifying tale. Unifying is creating a kind of unity within which one or more related stories appear. Of course, while talking about the structure of plot, you must have, while learning plot, must have understood the difference between simple plot and complex plot. So frame story is a kind of story which contains other stories. It becomes a complex story. You can take the example of Homer's Odyssey. I think you studied a poem by not Robert Browning. I'm sorry, Tennyson, Alfred Lord Tennyson. Do you remember? It is Ulysses. The title of the poem was Ulysses. Ulysses or Odysseus are the same people. In Greek, Odysseus is used, and in Roman language, Ulysses is used. The same person. So Odysseus, who was the traveler, who he wanted to travel across the world. So in Homer's Odysseus, Odyssey is the title of the play, and the character Odysseus tells about his wandering experience in the court of King Alcinous, or his visit to the island of Sorcerer. So these are stories within stories. He talks about his own travel, and then he talks about his experience in different courts of the kings, or his place visit to different places. So these are frame stories, story within story. And even Geoffrey Chaucer, who is known as the father the father of English poetry, who wrote during 14th century, the Middle Ages. Okay, use this kind of technique in his the Canterbury Tales. The Canterbury Tales is the collection of different stories, poetic stories. And in this particular, means these Canterbury Tales were written during 1387 to 1400. And in Canterbury Tales, Chaucer has used frame narrative. It begins with different characters, and each character tells a story. Means there is a knight. The knight's tale is from the Canterbury Tales itself. The knight's tale, Tale tale, story. Then there is a nun. Then there is one businessman. Then there is one, a scholar. So all these people tell their own stories. They are on the pilgrim. A pilgrimage, pilgrimage means visiting the holy place. Upon Wari Yatra Mantuba. So all of them are on the way to the pilgrimage, and on their way, during their stays at night, they tell one story. So the Canterbury Tales consist of these frame stories. So this pilgrimage frame story brings together a number of storytellers who appear with vivid personality traits. They got different personalities, different characteristics, and they build a dramatic relationship with one another. And even with the tales, Tales, tales is a kind of story only, but shorter than story. And they kind establish a kind of relationship with one another by telling these stories. At the same time, they establish the relationship with the tales as well. And there is a prologue, a general prologue. Prologue is a kind of introduction in the section of this poem, the Canterbury Tales, that deals with frame narrative. It talks about frame narrative. When we talk about frame story in modern literature, it has been used by the famous writer Henry James in The Turn of the Screw. Even Joseph Conrad has used this technique in his Heart of Darkness, and John Barth in Lost in the Funhouse. So this is what we understand about the frame story. In continuation with this discussion, there is one more term, that is framework. We have already got introduced with it. Framework is used in connection with the frame story itself. Okay, a framework is the narrative setting means the time and place of action in which the narration takes place. So it is the narrative setting within which other stories are told. The Canterbury Tales, for example, is the framework, and within that you come across different frame stories. So the framework may also have its own plot. Means the Canterbury Tales itself has its own plot. So in general, or on a general level, we can say that the framework is similar to structure and outline, the general outline of a work. A framework is nothing else but the general outline of the work. So this is how we understand certain terms which are related, which begin with F.